Hi, everyone. My name is Joshua Vonderheide, and today we are back with another percussion story with Mr. Jonny Allen. And I am also coming to you today as Jonny Allen's second cousin. A little
We're
percussion
related.
trivia for your next trivia night. We are related. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm related to the master
Pleasure is
of
all mine.
percussion. Jonny, we're so happy to have you here. How are you doing today?
Excellent. Thanks so much, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're diving right in here. I would love to know a little bit about your early musical background, your first experience with percussion, and when you knew you wanted to major in percussion and music.
Wow. Yeah, no, I love a good origin story here. I think like most kids, I was hitting stuff in the basement, in the kitchen, everywhere. I mean, it's some of my earliest memories, just hitting cardboard boxes, making mini drum sets, asking for a drum set every Christmas I can remember, basically. And I remember my mom mentioning like I was like 3 years old or something, and she made a diary entry or something, and she was like, Johnny really likes motorcycles and drumming, and I don't have a motorcycle, so she successfully nipped one of those in the bud.
Good job, Mom. Good job, Mom.
Yeah,
He's still with us. He's still alive. Thank you. Good job,
yeah,
Mom.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I think she didn't want either of those things to really persist in my life, but she could you could pick one, I guess.
Yeah.
And so, but actually, it makes it sound like they weren't supportive. My parents were very supportive of, they let me take lessons. They did eventually get me that drum set. They signed me up for, one of my early like ensemble experiences. I had like a little rock band that we played like the great 70s tunes and
Mhm.
Jimi Hendrix, Purple Haze, the first song we learned. Um,
Love that. Love that.
and also like randomly my mom was like, oh, there's a fife and drum corps in nearby. I signing up you and your sisters. And I was like, what's a fife and drum? And obviously
Yeah.
shows how
Right.
much I knew. But yeah, so a fife and drum corps. So I got to learn like my rudiments, my double stroke roll, and all that good stuff. And so it just kind of spiraled. I think every new thing I learned, I just loved it more.
Mhm.
Getting into pitched percussion, playing in marching band, in front ensemble, marching band, marching. I was a snare drummer for any marching snares out there, and then into the classical world and realizing you can do this in college. You
Mhm.
could maybe do it professionally.
Mhm.
That all just kind of came step by step. But as far as like when I knew I wanted to like major in percussion, I think I always was curious about it, but
Mhm.
it's a big unknown. The first time or the second you tell anyone like you want to be a musician, probably most people are like, oh, well, you can't actually do that. You can't make money doing that, whatever. You can't support yourself. But I had a teacher when I was in high school, Ben Toth. He'll probably come up later because he was like my first really serious percussion teacher. He teaches at Hart Conservatory in Hartford. Amazing percussionist, amazing guy. And he was the first person who was like, yeah, there's a lot of, competition in the music world, but his philosophy it was that there's always room for one more good one. And he said that and basically implied that if I stuck with it and tried to be the best player I could be, that there would be room for me in the music world. And that's really been totally true. I felt like it's a sense of community that is pretty amazing, that music world, the percussion world. So I'm so grateful that he gave me that bit of advice, because then I went on to major in music, and we can get more into those details later,
Yeah.
but that's a little bit of that background.
I love that. So, I mean, that's a semi-common story in the fact that you knew it early, but you're a little deeper than that, saying it's almost like, I mean, the words you just used were like, I kind of always knew, almost in a way. I mean, their curiosity, like maybe you don't know the exact pathway or how the pathway works, but just it was so strong in you for so long. I mean, I had like a pivotal moment for me when it like happened, like, oh yeah, this is confirmed now. I mean, there was interest, but there was like a moment. And that's
When was
interesting
that?
that for me, it was I played for the first time in an orchestra. I played timpani in an orchestra, and I was like, "This is it. Yeah, this is what I'm gonna do, 100%." I was
Nice.
14, and I played at Texas All State, Philharmonic Orchestra. And it was I played some good rep. It was like Symphonic Metamorphosis, Medea's
Oh,
Meditation and Dance of Vengeance. It was like, okay,
yeah.
for like a 14-year-old. I still have that recording. It's not bad. I've listened back to it. I'm like, that's not terrible. Which is impressive. Like, yes, great job. But I'm not sharing it with anybody, put it that way. And anyways,
Isn't that funny though, how like standards can change over time? Like in the moment, I'm sure you were like, this is the pinnacle of art making.
yeah,
And
right.
then you go to Juilliard and you listen again, you're like, oh yeah, I guess, I heard that. I heard that. Still, I'm sure it's still amazing given the context, but like, the way things change over time is pretty interesting.
It is the perception is an interesting thing. Perception is an interesting thing for sure. So I want to know, you're starting out with this just deep love, very broad. And one thing that I know about you is just how broad you're interested is in percussion. You have a jazz trio, you're a strong drum set player. You have recordings on Vic Firth playing four mallet marimba, and not just the rotations recording, but like Lansky three moves record, like
Oh, you
big,
found that one.
huge marimba, massive pieces that you've recorded. You've been in a chamber, multiple successful chamber ensembles, like really, really broad. So like, how did this level of education, obviously massive practicer, tons of drive, but like, give us an overview of how this came together education wise for you?
Yeah, I think I did always love playing with people,
Mhm.
and the solo stuff totally fun, and that's like what you work on in lessons, and I always loved it. But like, going back to playing in that fife and drum corps, playing in my rock band, finding a jazz trio. In college, I had a percussion trio that I played with. I don't know if you saw any Volta trio videos from back in the day.
Oh, for sure. Many.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, we met in school and just loved playing music together, and so I think I would always just try to stay open to, different musical experiences. So yeah, that was at my undergrad was up in Rochester at Eastman, and I'm very grateful I got 1 year with John Beck. My freshman year, got to study with, and that's kind of this amazing connection to like this lineage of percussionists, which is really cool. And then obviously Michael Burritt comes in my sophomore year, also like a huge influence on me. I think one one I don't know if this is the right time to mention it, but I was a dual degree student in college.
Oh,
So
I'm not
even
sure I
though
knew that one.
yeah,
Okay, cool.
I even though I say like, yeah, I think I knew for a long time that I wanted to be a percussionist, there was still the lingering voice, and maybe it's the voice of the parents being like, keep your options open.
Mhm.
And I think honestly that was like a musical approach for me too, of like, I want to be as good at everything as I can possibly be, because and then like when opportunities come and you lean into different things, then I'll allow myself to like quote unquote specialize. But I
Yeah.
think in undergrad that was as broad as even like, well, and if it turns out like I'm going to school and everyone else is just playing circles around me and I really don't belong here, I have this, back door. So I was like pre-med. I was like, oh, maybe I'll be a doctor. If this doesn't work out, you know, if it's hard to make money as a musician, I'll go into a career where it's, money is guaranteed.
Wow. Just casual pre-med degree. Well, now, Eastman does not offer. Was this at University of Rochester or?
Exactly.
Okay.
So I was both Eastman and University of Rochester. Spoiler alert, I did not complete that second degree. That's a
Okay.
story I'm sure I'll get to a little later.
Yeah.
But yeah, but Eastman was a great place to just like hear other great musicians, like the
Mhm.
percussion studio is amazing, but like so is the oboe studio and the cello studio and the,
Mhm.
you name it. And you're just hearing and hanging out with so many great musicians that it was really inspiring to just like learn from those people and I don't know, participate in music in that way. And everyone has such different focuses too, like including myself. Like I probably had a thing that I knew more about, but everyone else had that too. And so getting to ask people kind of like, what do they really care about? What do they know about? And try and learn a little bit about that was, I think, really, really helpful.
Yeah, I love that. And then obviously after Eastman, you went to Yale, where you studied with Bob Van Cise. And maybe you'd like to share a little bit about that experience. I mean, this is where you're meeting some other very important people in your life at this point as well.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. When I went, Went down to Connecticut, started studying at Yale, and I knew I think I knew the Yale percussion group existed.
Mhm.
I knew Bob Van Slice from the poster on the wall in my
Mhm.
practice room. I think when I went for my audition, I almost didn't even recognize him because that poster was from, 30 years ago, and
Right.
and
Right, right, right.
and he walked into the room, and the whole room just has this reverence. I was like, "Oh wait, that must be him. Like, this is crazy." So I don't recommend you show up to an audition not being able to recognize the teacher.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the audition experience was really amazing. It was like an hour long, and it's just this back and forth. You're having a conversation, he's giving you feedback, you're trying things out, and the way he talked about music and um, the culture of the studio, I think really resonated with me, and it quickly became my top choice. But I'd had to get in off the wait list. I wasn't just an instant accept. So, not everything comes easily, I guess.
Wow,
Um,
that's amazing. Another fascinating detail that I didn't know about you. Yeah, and, there's been a couple things that were transformative, super important experiences for me, like going to Aspen on a scholarship, which I was like not the first pick for. It had been Chad Crummell, and then he went and did something else, and then I got to go there. It's you take opportunities, zoom, zoom, wherever they come. Just walk through
yeah,
the door. It comes. You don't be proud about it. Like, oh, it's off the wait list. No, it's you. You did the thing.
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And then you take it and you go for it, and that's an important spirit, I think, to carry through as an artist, is being ready to walk through the door as soon as someone says yes.
Right.
When you get that yes, you have to be ready to walk through an open door. So that door opened, you walk on through, and now you've been studying in Eastman, you've been studying at Yale. People are coming together. You have this super wide, experience factor where you've played tons of different instruments, a depth of experience on a lot of different instruments. What was the most defining moment in your life that had
Ooh.
this big significant impact on where your career kind of ended up?
Well, this was, yeah, probably the story of quitting my second degree in undergrad, because it was my junior year at Eastman. So I
Mhm.
successfully navigated 2 whole years of taking chemistry courses and bio lab, and leading this kind of double life. Um, and I was in a lesson with Michael Burrett, and I don't know why he picked this moment. Maybe he could just see it in my eyes. I had an organic chemistry test the next day,
Mhm.
and organic chemistry is a hard class. I don't think I told him that I had this test, but he was just like, the other big thing with junior year from the musical side at Eastman is there's a thing called the performer's certificate. It's like
Mhm.
a deluxe jury where you can pass or fail the jury, but you also can have this little extra carrot of, like, you get your performer's certificate and you
Mm.
perform on the big stage, and there's this panel of jurors who, decide whether you get this thing or not. So it's actually a nice extra little bit of pressure to put on the performance that you give. So I think for Michael Burrett, he knew this was like a watershed moment, and he was like, I just want you to think, like, what do you really want to do with your life? Actually, what he said, he was like, I'm gonna step out for a second. I want, when I come back, tell me like your five best memories just in your life in general.
Wow.
And he comes back in, and I've got my list prepared. It's funny because I think one of them was like my favorite NFL team winning the Super Bowl or something like that. And but then, almost every other one was like winning a marching band award,
Mhm.
or getting to play with the wind ensemble, playing a concerto. These musical memories. None of them were, you know getting the right pH level in bio. Nothing against that, but you know what
Right,
I'm
right, right.
saying. And then, he was like, sounds like you like music is a really important thing to you. And like, if you want it to be a big part of your life, you've got to, you have to commit to it.
Yeah.
He was like, you can do this. And if you want to do this, the only way is if you put your whole self into it. And he's like,
Yeah.
I believe in you. So just, he's like, I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm just saying, like, this is here for you as a career, but you have to make that leap. And I called into the university office that day. I withdrew from my other degree. I did not go to my organic chemistry test.
Yes. Now, no, now this is really what we're really dealing with here is the most awesome hooky story that anyone's ever heard. This is really what's happening is like Johnny's like, I had this defining moment where it was my entire career on the line. All I had to do was skip a chemistry final, you know?
Skip a big scary test. It's so funny because I'm not gonna lie, that was a big part of the factor. I was like, "So
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
telling me I don't have to take that test tomorrow?"
Yeah. That's amazing. That's
Yeah,
dude, MJB,
yeah.
MJB coming through in the most important moment. I
Well, he's
love
gonna be
that.
hanging out with you soon, right?
Yes, he's I mean, and so are you. You're coming to teach with us. MJB's coming to teach with us. It's gonna be really, really exciting. I don't think we've announced that yet. So anyone watching this, news for you. It's very
Oh, wow,
exciting.
okay.
And I mean, this leads. So I mean, now you're all in. He's like absolutely cemented. Like I'm going to be a percussionist, and now everything else starts to happen from there. You know, in terms of the seriousness, people noticing you in a very, very good way that you're playing is at a super high level. And over the course of years, maybe you can, there's another question that's going to happen. But maybe you can tell us a little bit about Sandbox and just this international powerhouse group that now everyone knows. But it wasn't always like that. It wasn't, oh, Sandbox happens and now everyone knows you. It was Sandbox happens and what is that? Right?
Right.
Like no one knows what that means. That's how every company starts. I mean, I go back and look at our first percussion conservatory posts, and it's like 8 likes, and I was like, yes, it's like just stoked that anyone notices at all for any sort of thing, right? So when you're in those super early days, how did that shared vision develop and grow to help slowly turn this thing into what it has become, which is the preeminent percussion ensemble, percussion quartet in the world.
Thanks. I mean, that means a lot to hear that, especially because you know what it's like to start something and to see
I
it,
do.
see it even in those moments where you're like, "God, I really hope this works," and, like,
Yeah.
no guarantees of anything, but, like, you're trying your best and hoping,
Yeah.
and so to we certainly don't feel like we've, like, peaked or anything, we
Mhm.
are always trying to continue growing, but to be in a place where, we feel at least a little stable is it's we're so grateful for it, and you
Yeah.
hit the nail on the head with those early days, like, yeah, because I got into grad school and I met the first person I met from Sandbox was Victor
Mhm.
Cachese, and at that point, so I was just leaving Volta Trio. We decided long distance would be tough. Actually, I think Sean Connors, who is now in Third Coast,
Mhm.
played in Volta in my stead when I
Oh,
left for
okay.
Connecticut, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
Small world.
Hmm.
And so I met Victor, and technically Sandbox already existed, though it didn't even have a name. But he had a quartet. I was not in it. and but I don't know. Weirdly, I still was like, I'm gonna play in his quartet. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know. I had this weird feeling that like he and I really hit it off.
Mhm.
We were playing chamber music together. I mean, at Yale, chamber music is like a cornerstone of the curriculum. You're playing, rehearsing every day, getting ready for this one concert. And we were playing Third Construction by
Yeah.
John Cage, and like it was just this like constant like one upping of like, okay, well, like I'm gonna memorize my part. Well, I'm gonna memorize my part too. Okay, well, I'm gonna actually also learn this other part. I mean, it's like it was this kind of insanity. We were obsessed with the piece and with playing together.
Mhm.
Um, and I even remember Sandbox as it was then. Maybe they had a name at that point. I was in the room when they named the group though. So I just always made myself like I put myself around the group as it was forming. And they were making that first Mallet quartet video, which again, I'm not in, but Vic was like doing the audio takes or whatever, picking the video shots, and I was like, "Oh, this is really cool. Like, let me just help you out. Like, I like this take, I like this angle," and so like just gave him a hand making the video. I don't think I had like a motive to it of like I'm gonna do this so I can be in the group. It just was like what I wanted to be doing in that moment, And
Yeah.
sure enough, when, I think the group played one or two concerts without me, and then one of the members got an opportunity in Europe to like go do something there, and
Mhm.
Sandbox barely existed. So everyone was basically like, yeah, like you should go do that. There was an opening in the group, and I think Vic had to think for like 0 seconds about who should take that spot, and I was being offered almost nothing. Essentially I was being offered the opportunity to pay rent on a studio the next year,
Right,
like
right,
like
yeah.
spending money on being in the group. Um, but you were talking about, this is a very long-winded way to get to, the shared vision of the members.
Mhm.
And there was like this long-term like aspect that everyone had kind of without saying it, but it was this feeling that we're going to put in everything we can right now, even if it means our lives are even a little like harder in this moment, because in 5 years, in 10 years, we want to still be doing this. And we believe that if we invest in ourselves, it'll, pay dividends, so to speak. But it was just a big leap of faith, but
Yeah.
everyone had it. I think if one of the four of us, so that's me, that's Victor, obviously, who I mentioned. Ian was also an original member,
Mhm.
Ian Rosenbaum, and Terry Sweeney, who also was not an original member, joined like 1 year later
Okay.
in like 2012 or something, maybe 2013. We all agreed that we wanted to still be doing this in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years. And somehow that made all the difference. Having
Hmm.
that seriousness with which we took it, even though I don't know, my first season with Sandbox, I think we played 3, maybe 4 concerts, and even thinking back like to 2015 when technically the group had been around for like a few years, we were still, driving the minivan down to South Carolina and this sort of stuff. It's like
I love that.
total.
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Like
Love
you
that.
you don't never forget those memories.
Yeah.
And they make it even sweeter when now we can fly to performances and
Right,
you can
right.
start to, really count your blessings there. But I don't know if that answers the question, but that's a
Very
little
much
bit of
so.
the
Very much
background.
so. I mean, I think it's so important to have people who just believe in the mission and vision of what you're doing above the monetary value of what it's going to be in this moment. And like for us, that person is Stephen Keener at Percussion Conservatory, who just saw me doing what I was doing. He would be like, "Sure, yeah, I can help out with that," and then just proceeded to kill it at every role that's ever been thrown at him. In terms of what we do together. And my wife stepped up. She's working her own job now, but in the early days, she was doing a ton of our video editing and admin things. And you just have to have people who just believe in you, because at the early days of nearly anything, that's it. It's just that
Right.
feeling that this is good for the world. It's like
Right.
this just needs to happen because it needs to happen. And I don't know how to make money out of it, and I don't know how to relate it to enough people yet, and I don't know how to get the word out, and I don't know how to do any of these things, but I know it has to happen.
Right.
And it sounds to me like that was a through line for you guys. It was like, it has to happen. Like, we have to find a way to make it work, even if it means we're playing 3 concerts a year and throwing all of our gear in a van and riding together and sharing the gas cost, and we're all going backwards in money right now. Like,
Oh yeah.
it has to happen because there's a vision. And so that's a beautiful, beautiful story. And it's a perfect segue for, like, so what is the biggest challenge of running and performing in a world famous percussion quartet? And it might have changed over time, but maybe you want to touch on something like at the beginning days, and maybe now as well would be great.
Yeah, I think that's a good way, because you're right. Like the context of it changes so drastically.
Yeah.
The beginning days, like the challenge is almost like finding things to do in a way.
Yeah.
Like
Right. Gigs.
yeah, exactly. Like gigs, and even like getting like all these like it's the beauty of being fresh out of school, and obviously it's also the most stressful part of being
Mhm.
fresh out of school. Is you're like, what am I gonna do?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
okay, I've got that gig, I've got this teaching thing. I've got, that recording session or whatever, but it's like, you probably have time where you're like, okay, I guess I could keep practicing, or like, something like that. And so like the early days, the challenge is just like find a way to like tow it one step further forward, like every day. If that's a
Yeah.
cold email to someone, or, writing a piece of music because the group needs repertoire or whatever, there are all kinds of things that we did early on to just try and like march it forward. Because at the beginning, it's just you, no
Yeah.
one is knocking on your door. You're proving it
Mhm.
every second of every
Mhm.
day. You just have to be your best advocate. And so that was the challenge at the beginning, is like, you just know you have to earn it.
Yeah.
No one's gonna give it to you. People are barely gonna take your word for it. You just have to kind of
Yeah.
insist that, like, this is happening because I think it's
Yeah.
awesome. And if I stop thinking it's awesome, then it's dead.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of but that's where it's awesome to have, you know, friends and collaborators, colleagues, like it was a quartet for a reason, because any one of us couldn't have done it by ourselves.
Yeah.
And if I was having a down day, then,
Mhm.
Ian would pick me up. And if Ian's having a down day, Terry's got his back. It's like, um, it really does take a village in a way. And so that made it much easier. And the fact that we were very compatible as personalities, we have these very different strengths, very different weaknesses, and we're able to kind of together create one cohesive whole.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's been a very important thing for us too at the PC. Like big shout out to Ed Choi. Like Ed Choi will just every few months he'll just send me a message like, "By the way, the PC is awesome. Yes, go." And I'm just like, "Yeah." And then you get on your computer and you're just coding some new thing, or you're editing some new thing, and then a member jumps in and they say like, "Oh, dude, that practice track, yeah." And then you go and you get back at it again. Because there's
Right.
many days, like past couple weeks, I've just been sick as a dog.
Oh
And
no.
you just like, the PC is not the only thing I do. And
Right.
sometimes, like, and also being a recent dad and all these things, like there's a lot. The priorities are tough to manage all the things. And sometimes you just have that feeling of like, whew, man, it's hard to just get yourself at the computer to work on this thing, even for an hour, when really I want to be
Right.
working on it 6 hours a day. But even it's like today is like, dude, I got 45 minutes in. And I think that's, for me, that was something really important that I learned early on, is that like the graph, or I guess it's like a bar graph of like, it's really important to show up every day, but you
Right.
might show up this much on Monday.
Yeah.
And then Tuesday you show up. And then
Right.
Wednesday you show up halfway. And then as long as you're doing something, as long as you're showing up a little bit
Yeah.
every single day, man, amazing things happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's it's the consistency. Like
Yeah.
learning a language or something. It's like you can't take many, many days off and expect it to have grown. Like a little every day is really, that was totally the strategy early on.
Yeah, I love that. And now is the time where I let everyone know that this podcast is sponsored by Majestic Percussion, who has helped me show up every day. They helped me get these instruments behind me. They help me teach students. They help support our initiatives at the Percussion Conservatory, and they're a huge sponsor. They are a principal sponsor as well for our scholarship competition every year. So I just want to shout out Majestic. They have been amazing to me personally, to the Percussion Conservatory, and we're really, really proud and happy to have them on board in this journey. And that's a good time for you, Jonny. Is there anyone that you'd like to shout out here on the podcast today?
Oh yeah, we have some, some sponsors who really similarly, I think they make what we do so much more streamlined, and are moving the art form forward. So if I'm allowed to say, yeah, we
Yeah.
work with Adams and Pearl, great instruments there, and Zildjian, which is now part of Vic Firth, not just with the instruments, but with their kind of a platform for putting content out there. I think they're doing really amazing things. Also, Black Swamp.
Mhm.
Uh, you never hear a woodblock sound that amazing, right?
I love it. It's so important to all you folks out there who are starting things. Like Jonny and I are talking about, like it takes a village, and you can't do everything. It's not like you're gonna learn how to perform and build your own instruments. Like we need help. We need help as performers, as educators. So if you're feeling ever stuck in that regard, reach out to me and talk, or Jonny, or anyone who's like figured out how to do this, and just ask, like, what is that process like? Because for me, that was actually transformative of making the PC happen. And I'm sure that your support too, Jonny, from your, companies and manufacturers, it makes a huge difference. It really, really does.
I also, this is not a sponsor, but it's someone who I met recently who's speaking of like the ability to just take on a challenge and like rise to the call.
Mhm.
Tuned metal pipes are becoming a more and more like ubiquitous
Right.
percussion piece of
Right.
equipment. And I mean, maybe this has been around forever. I'm just like last to the party, but Harris Percussion, this person based originally out of, I think, one of the Carolinas, but now lives in San Francisco, but making these incredible metal pipes. And like, I used to have to like cut them by hand. I mean, I still do at this point, but now that I know I can just buy these things, they're tuned perfectly. There's like the string and the mounting is already there. It's stable on a table. That
Mhm.
rhymes. It's like, I'm so inspired. So anyway, it's not a sponsor. Maybe one day if
Harris Percussion, are you watching the podcast?
are you
Get your butt
watching
on
the
this
pod?
podcast, Harris Percussion. All
Yeah,
right.
but if someone wants to play a piece with a bunch of metal pipes and doesn't feel like taking 20 hours to make them, that's an amazing resource.
Was that the most financially irresponsible thing you've ever spent money on, was metal pipes? Or, but maybe you had regrets. All right. So, most financially irresponsible thing you ever spent money on, but you have zero regrets. Tell me.
It's funny. I have like an impulse buy memory from grad school. There was like a Cyber Monday deal on this tiny little like Gretsch drum set that like at the time I was playing these like little gigs that like I was like, if I had like a kit with an 18-inch bass drum, doesn't need to be nice, like I can just I shouldn't say that. It's a nice kit, but it's like it was on it had a great deal, and I just like saw it on the internet and I was just like, let me buy this thing. It was like $300. So
Yeah.
like at the time I was like, okay, like I can do this, I think I've in context, I can make this work, but
Yeah.
it was probably like given where I was in my life, that was like definitely a little like
What am
an
I doing
impulse
right
buy.
now? Yeah. This,
Yeah.
how is this making me money? Did it make you money?
Oh yeah. I still play on that kit.
There you
So
go. So it was not irresponsible at all. It turned out for the best. Turned out for the
yeah,
best.
right.
I love it.
If I think of anything else, I'll let you know. But at this point, it might be NFL Sunday Ticket.
Well, that. I mean, that's just necessary. That's different. That's not
Yeah,
irresponsible. That's a must.
yeah,
That's an
yeah.
immutably has to happen. We're done. All
It's
right.
they've got me. They've got me, man. It's like they take all my money now. It's like if they made another thing that could give me a little more content, I'd buy that too.
Yeah, I love it. And it might, maybe this is going to be your Groundhog Day for this question, is like rewatching. You mentioned like your favorite team win the game, but like if you had to relive one single day of your life over and over and over again, Groundhog Day style, which day would you pick?
Wow. Okay, I got to think about that. Recency bias is going to kick in just because
Okay,
the
dual degree
name.
guy, recency bias, dual
Ayo
degree, dual degree.
comes in handy every so often. Yeah, I'll just go with it because it's the first thing that's coming to mind. But this wasn't that long ago. It was early this year. There's this new kind of recording project that Sandbox has started on, and it's a piece that's I only found out about like a couple years ago, but it's a piece from the 70s called Canto Ostinato, and it's like a Dutch minimalist piece that if you live in Amsterdam, you can go see this piece get performed like every weekend,
Okay.
but somehow it did not like crack my conscience. And a lot of folks I talked to, they're like, "Oh yeah, I don't know that piece," but
Mhm.
it's since I heard it a few years ago, I've been totally obsessed, and I've been like trying to make all these different arrangements. The cool thing is it's a piano piece. Originally it was like four pianos, but it's very flexible. There's just these like core lines and these canons and like optional lines of music you can play. So you could play it with, I've seen it done solo. I think we've done versions with like 50 people.
Yeah.
And the range of the piece fits perfectly on a 5-octave marimba. I think the
Ah.
lowest note is, like, the low D flat, and the highest note is, like, maybe the high B flat, high A
Mhm.
flat, something like that. And with a little transposition, you can play it on a vibraphone or some of the lines on the vibraphone and stuff like that. So it's like it feels really it's just a gorgeous piece. So fun to play. We were recording it at the beginning of the year and just like having this I don't know, it's a very freeing experience to play the piece because you can choose your own adventure. Yeah, I'm going to play a little bit of this voice, a little bit of that voice. I'm just going to pluck this note out and play that one. And we did like I don't know, 4 or 5 passes of the piece, which is like an hour long per run or something like that.
Wow.
And I was just like floating for the whole day, just like living in this beautiful, I mean, it's a very tonal, like harmonically driven piece.
Mhm.
And we'd go back to the booth and I just like hanging out with in recording studios anyway, like wood interior,
Yeah.
funny angles,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
glass windows that look into other rooms, and I don't know, there's something about the architecture that I'm into. And so that was just like the perfect day, like getting to play a piece I loved, getting to listen back to it in like high fidelity. I love a good recording session, especially on music that you really, really love.
Well, that sounds beautiful. That sounds like a wonderful day. I would see very much why you would wanna do that more than once. That sounds lovely. Although by the 8,000th canto ostinato, you might be like, "I'm ready for new chords."
Yeah, right, 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 exactly.
Okay. What's a skill or hobby you secretly wish you were amazing at? The most recent Instagram
Ooh.
I saw, you were, like, plucking a violin, and I was like,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, right, right, right. Yeah, that's a skill I could definitely stand to get better at. I played a little cello in my day.
"Okay,
I should have mentioned this in my early musical
you're
upbringing, but,
mentioning now,
like
all good."
yeah, right, right, but there was a lot of different, like, music making things, like, singing is, like I'm not a great singer, I'm like a blending kind of singer, but I love singing in choir.
Yeah.
You don't wanna hear me solo.
Yeah, right, right.
But it's like I feel like that's a skill I weirdly draw upon, like, all the time. If I'm figuring something out on marimba and I'm, like, not quite hearing it yet, I'm like if I'll try to, like, sing through some of the lines, some of the different voices, and get a sense for, like, oh, like, how does it feel in the voice, and often that
Mhm.
really informs things. That's a total tangent. That's not a skill or hobby I wanna get much better. I'm comfortable with my skills. I don't know if this counts, but I wish I was a little better at social media.
Oh, wow, interesting.
So I know. It's like most people are trying to get off it,
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
and you know, I firmly believe there's a sweet spot, where it's
Yeah.
like the right amount, and I think maybe a little below it. Like I don't think actually I like barely use it. I have an Instagram, but that thing of me plugging the violin that's from the pandemic.
Yeah, it's like 3 years ago. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
right, that's right. I try to sleuth around, and I'm like, "Oh, I'll find some interesting questions." I'm like, "He's plucking a violin 3 years ago. How do I work that into a question?"
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, no. Yeah, unfortunately, you'll see like I'm well represented on the Sandbox Instagram, but obviously
Yes.
that's managed by people who are not me. So, yeah, this is probably a lame answer.
Not at all. No, I mean, I think, what it feeds into the musician. Just you said, like, from a very, very young age, you were just so curious about music always. And music is communication. I mean, it is a non-linguistic, I guess, form of communications, like almost
Yeah.
almost a scientific form of communication. And
Mm.
I wish I was way better at surfing. So mine's a little bit less mine's a little bit grandiose than what I'm talking. I think the young kids would say I'm pulling a cap right now. I'm like, dude, I just want to surf. Like, come on, let's be real.
Are you a little good at
I
surfing at
am
least?
absolutely awful at surfing, and I love it. I've mentioned this on a couple other of the episodes where, like, it's definitely the thing in my life where it's the weirdest ratio of, like, the worst at it and what I want to be best at. Like, it makes no rational sense.
Do you get like one good wave like that or
Usually when I go out, I get up on, like, 1 or 2 waves, but I have to be out there for, like, a long
okay.
time. I mean, getting 1 or 2 waves in an hour or 2 is, like, you crashed 18 times and then got up on one wave, you know? So, I
Right,
mean, it's
right.
like, it's a labor of love. I've taken one lesson in my whole life. I mean, I need to like get training if I want to get good. it's just it's just irrational, but I love it and I'll never not love it. I know that. It's weird. So maybe that's how you feel about social media.
Right, it's that connection because I love people, you know?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
a huge fan of just, like, having a good conversation with someone, meeting someone new. I mean, I don't think I'm, like, the most extroverted, but I'm probably on the extroverted side of the
Mm.
spectrum, and, like, I just see this, like, potential there that somehow my brain, like, doesn't I don't know, doesn't have that skill or something like that, so,
It's
yeah,
trainable. You can do it. If you
I
wanna
could
do
yeah.
it, you can do it. I'm better at managing it than being on camera myself, if that makes sense. So, like, whoever that person is who runs your Sandbox thing, like, that's me for, like, ITI, like, our timpani intensive we do at Rice. So I'm getting like,
Yeah,
that account has popped off much more quickly than, like, PC, just because PC is, like, me having to do my own stuff, and ITI feels a little bit more like me helping folks manage a brand, and so it's
right.
that could be an
What
interesting thing too.
That's 2 jobs, right? Like, being the one
They're
on
very
one
different.
side of the camera and being one on the other, it's like so Victor manages the Sandbox Instagram and,
Oh,
like,
I thought
and
you guys,
social
like,
media.
hired it out. Oh, wow. So that's all Victor.
It's pretty authentic. Like, we have help, but it's like, that's been his domain, and he really
Cool.
cares about it.
Yeah.
And so the reason we've hired some help at least is just because like poor Victor's there, like setting up a camera, getting the lighting right, and then like running to the other side. And like it's it's an insane amount of like mental strain to
Yeah,
get to have context shift like that from the producer to the content that we're actually seeing. And yeah,
for
so
sure.
if you have someone who can do just one side of it and know how to capture it really well, and someone on the other side just be like, oh, I'll keep doing this thing that maybe someone thinks is cool or whatever.
Right, right. I love it. Well, to be continued. That's definitely one to be continued. We're gonna come back to this in 20 years. You're gonna have 1,000,000 followers, and he's gonna be like,
Yeah, I
"I
know,
wish
I
I
know.
was
Well,
better at social media," and then he's gonna be like a total star. I love it. And
yeah,
so finally, what's one thing about you that most people might be surprised to learn?
we've already touched on my mild football obsession. Um, I root for a controversial team though. Do you know?
No.
I'm a New England Patriots fan,
That's not
which
controversial. You're, like, from that part of the country.
well, yeah, no, exactly. I grew up in
Yeah.
Connecticut, and I could have gone Giants or Patriots. And at the time, I remember like they weren't good yet. It was like the '90s. I watched them lose a Super Bowl, and I remember it was against the
Yeah.
Green Bay Packers. Everyone else was like rooting for the Packers because the Packers were like you can find a Packers fan anywhere. And so we were
Right,
at
right,
this
right.
Super Bowl party, and I remember asking my dad, I was like, "Why can't we just root for the Packers? Like that looks way more fun." And he told me this was a good lesson. He was like, "That's not how this works. You know, like your team, you stick with them, and it makes it all the more worthwhile when they succeed."
Right.
It's not shortly thereafter, Patriots had untold amounts of success. It's a little almost embarrassing. So I try not, because I try to be a respectful fan. And it's funny though, I was obviously a fan all through those
Yeah.
years, and now they're terrible
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, that's
Back to back
right.
4-win seasons, and I'm weirdly like even more into it.
Right, because
I just
the whole joy is not the dynasty, it's the hope. It's the building.
right.
It's the building and the hope
Maybe
and the
that's what it
journey
is.
and you can't have opera if it's just banger after banger after banger. Like, you need, like, dialogue and waiting, and they have to be long, and it's like, and then there's this golden ratio aria right at the moment, and it's like,
Right.
Turandot, it's like, there it
Yeah.
is, right? Like, gotta Nessun Dorma it, man.
Yeah.
You gotta do it that way. You have to do it that way, or it's just like you're saying. It's almost like if there were 6 Nessun Dormas back to back in that opera, you'd be bored, right? You'd be like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's too much. Like this, we're winning too much. Now that sounds like the most, like, you're gonna make a lot of fans mad at you. Like, guys, we're just winning too much. I wish we stunk.
Right. Right. I know. It's so funny. But I've managed to get like 2 other members of Sandbox into football in the process. They were like
Yeah.
already kind of into it, and then I would be like, "Oh, we should watch. Like, how's your team doing? Oh, I heard the blah, blah," like, and it's gotten them just a little more excited,
Yeah.
and so I can have people to talk about it with. But I'm by far the most irrationally entertained by that
I
sport, and I get
love
it.
that.
The sport is barbaric. I shouldn't like it, but
It's okay. We all have those things, and we're all so sports wise. Just on the sports talk, Johnny and I are both big ultimate frisbee people as well. To the point where I took a tryout for the New York Empire while I lived in New York and made it past the first cut. I would like to tell you very much. So at some point, you and I need to get together and we need to throw the disc, my man,
we need
because
to toss it.
yeah, we got to
Yeah,
toss the disc. We got to toss the. That's maybe the thing. That's the niche thing that helps us both do the social media. We're gonna be disc percussionists. We're gonna be disc drummers on social media, and we're gonna figure it out. Although we live pretty far away, so it's gonna be tough, but we're gonna figure it
that's
out.
I could throw it from here to Houston.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Johnny, thank you so much for coming on the show, for being here. And we really look forward to your residency that's coming up with us very soon, which we are about to announce and talk about. We're doing some polyrhythm stuff, and we're going to have people play for you, and we're going to have people come meet you, the public. It's going to be open to the public on the final class. Did you want to share just a little bit about what's happening in that first class of yours?
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna share. I call it my rhythm routine. It's a set of exercises that I've developed kind of over the last like decade, but I finally wrote down just as a way of like honing your rhythmic skills.
Mhm.
Sharpening that knife so that you can be just a little more precise with your execution, with your understanding. I call it. It's not like building a muscle. It's like refining your taste or something like that,
Mm,
like getting like a really sensitive ear to rhythm. And that's sort of what we're and like training your brain to be able to like track things at a more and more kind of minute level. And so I also think it's really fun. It turns into a meditation of sorts once you really get the hang of it. And
yeah.
so I'm excited to kind of share that process with everybody and maybe get some other people addicted to it the way I am.
Love it. Well, I love that. Sounds awesome. And we're really looking forward to it. And until the next time, Johnny, this has been a percussion story. And we're so glad to now know yours. All right.
Thanks, Josh.
See you at the next one, guys. Bye bye.